Today, we're going to talk about a factor that I've noticed in cases of high conflict divorce and custody, and something that, if you're in a high conflict divorce or custody situation, maybe you've experienced some parental alienation, I can just about guarantee you that you have seen this dynamic play out in your court case or your custody battle or whatever the case may be. But I feel like this particular topic, it is bleeding out in our culture in general. I'd like to make a whole series of YouTube videos that have to do with this particular topic. Some of it's going to pertain directly to parental alienation, high conflict divorce and custody, but it's just relevant in across the board in so many ways. Specifically, what we're going to talk about here is a particular dynamic or issue that, again, I've just seen more and more and more and more over the last several years. I've worked many cases having to do with high conflict custody divorce as an evaluator, as a consultant, as a coach, etc. I'm one of the few mental health professionals that you're going to find out there that works with parenting, um, child and adolescent development, child and adolescent psychology, behavior, as well as parenting dynamics, family dynamics, personality disorders, and all of that. Okay. Without further ado, I'm trying not to be too vague here. It's just a really big topic, and it's a really important one. It's hard to grab the tiger by the tail, frankly. And but what I have seen in many of these custody cases, and as I'm kind of, because I've been using AI as well to help me build out these ideas. I've plugged in a ton of information and it's helped me kind of organize it, which has been extremely helpful. But we need to talk about how the message that the child is fragile and that the high conflict parent is protecting that fragility, and that makes them a good parent. All right, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about the general disposition that the children or child is very fragile. And if you are not aligned with treating the child as though they're very fragile, then you are a bad parent, that you are causing harm to that child if you are not treating the child as though they're super duper fragile. In other words, right, instead of being in a position where we treat kids as though they are incredibly resilient, which is true. Instead, what we've done is we've moved over to the other side of the spectrum where we treat children as though they're extremely fragile. I personally believe it's extremely problematic and extremely destructive to children. And in many regards, it should be considered child abuse. And unfortunately, too many mental health professionals have fallen into this camp of treating kids as though they're fragile instead of treating kids as though they're resilient. So instead of helping them understand hardship and challenges and helping them overcome those hardships and challenges, we should remove those hardships and challenges from their lives, and we should make life easy for them. And what I've noticed is that this gets really insidious and really nasty, is because you may have a high conflict type parent, or maybe even a extremely narcissistic type parent, who supports this narrative, right? And so they create what I'm calling, for now, it's the clinical jargon is covert enmeshment, right? There's an emotional and covert enmeshment, which is a much better clinical jargony way of, instead of calling it what I was originally calling it, which is mommy dearest syndrome. So the parent that is supporting this narrative, right, this portrayal of the child that they're totally fragile and incapable, and that they're too vulnerable for that and they're too weak for that, it's very destructive to children. Unfortunately, again, too many mental health professionals have fallen in line with this, and frankly, so does family court all too often. And I'm going to give an example that I've heard all the time, many times, in when it comes to custody and custody sharing, and that is that, for example, the mom will say, "Oh, the child gets upset when I pass them off to dad, so therefore I should keep the child all the time." And that is such a convoluted, overgeneralization and misrepresentation of what is actually going on here. Because the truth of the matter is, let's be honest, like in the case of high conflict BPD moms, high conflict borderline personality disordered moms, they're not in it to protect the child. They're in it to mask their own emotional fragility and their own fear of abandonment. And they're using that child as a little bit of a crutch. And so that stunts the child's growth, development, maturation process, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what they do is they build this narrative that this child is fragile, this child has special needs, and I'm the one protecting those special needs, and that makes me a good parent. And because the dad, for example, and honestly, it's I swear, like 90%, this dynamic has to do with the mom is treating the kid as though they're fragile, and the dad is the villain, because the dad is not always in line with this idea that the child is fragile and we just need to treat the kid that they're fragile, and we need to remove anything that is difficult from their lives. I'm not going to get into how harmful and detrimental this kid is to, or that this attitude is to the child and their development, their growth, and their overall well being, their long term well being. I'm not going to get into that right now. That's probably going to be for a different video, because there are so many things at play here. But it's no wonder, by the way, that we see kids doing worse and worse and worse and worse. It's no wonder that we see their mental health getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. It's no wonder that we see their functioning just get worse and worse and worse and worse. It's because of this attitude and disposition. It's not, again, it's not just like with high conflict BPD moms. It's also a cultural thing. Therapists are doing this too. Teachers are doing this too. School counselors are doing this too. Like we see the schools just kind of lower the bar and make things easier and easier and easier for the kids. And do they do better? No, they continually do worse. Fact of the matter is that the truth is that we need to treat kids as though they're resilient, and we need to help them grow stronger so that they can face their challenges and overcome them. So instead of looking at this in the proper light, that you have an overbearing parent who has poor emotional control and low ego strength. Instead, what we've done is taken a child, we take the children, and instead of saying, oh, we have a parent here who is overbearing and can't work through their own challenges. Instead, what we have is a narrative of a child who can't handle things. And so so they make it look like I'm the one that's helping this kid. And so, therefore, if you're not supporting this narrative that the child is fragile, right? Because again, that's interference. That's not the core issue. The core issue is an overbearing and over controlling parent who has this severe emotional enmeshment, and this covert emotional enmeshment. Again, I started out by calling this mommy dearest syndrome, because what's happening is you have these moms who are creating this like significant level of enmeshment and loyalty to mommy dearest, right? Instead of being loyal or aligned to what is good for the child, we're serving her best interest instead of doing what's good for the child, to the severe detriment of the children. And again, they're using this as a weapon. I've just noticed this over and over and over and over again lately, is that if you're not aligned with this narrative that the child is fragile and we have to protect the fragility of this parent, and you did this and you did that, then you're a bad parent. And again, to the severe detriment to the child.